bank runs, the government stepping in to save the country and the economy and the entire system. My gosh, it's kind of feeling like 2008 all over again. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. I am Trish Regan. This is the Trish Regan Show. Make sure you subscribe. If you haven't, do that right now. It's so important. Hit the bell as well. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so that you know exactly when I have a program. I am here on YouTube, the Trish Regan channel. I'm over on Rumble, Trish Regan Show. And of course, every single day where you will always find me, no matter what, is on Apple Podcasts, the Trish Regan Show over there. Portions of today's program are brought to you by Legacy Precious Metals. Go to legacypminvestments.com for more. I predicted we would have some challenging times ahead. What we saw at Silicon Valley Bank is just the beginning. We got a lot of challenges here. And while the feds did step in to handle this situation, how many more times can they do it? And you have to ask yourself, is this sort of the Bear Stearns moment before Lehman? Could we actually see the entire system come down? I certainly hope not, and Biden certainly hopes not, but this is happening under his watch. He tried to calm things down here today. Take a listen.
I want to briefly speak about what's happening in Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Today, thanks to the quick action of my administration over the past few days, Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. Small businesses across the country, the deposit accounts at these banks can breathe easier knowing they'll be able to pay their workers and pay their bills.
Okay, so that's the good news. Yes, everybody's deposits at all the banks, thanks to this window that the Fed opened up on Sunday night where banks could borrow money from the government if needed, well, everybody's deposits are going to be safe. But that doesn't change the reality that all of these regional banks, any bank with less than $250 billion in deposits, is not subject to the same kind of regulatory environment as the big guys, you know, the JP Morgan Chases, Wells Fargo's, Bank of America's of the world. And as such, anyone who has money in any one of these smaller banks may be looking to diversify the heck out of there.
Mr. President, what do you know right now about why this happened? And can you assure Americans that there won't be a ripple effect?
Do you expect other banks to fail, Mr. President?
Should all depositors be protected at all banks?
We were not going to get any answers on that. I don't know if he fully understands everything, but hopefully Yellen, hopefully Powell, hopefully they all get it. I think they do. They should have been there earlier. I didn't think we needed to really wait until the 11th hour on Sunday evening, keeping everybody on pins and needles, because there were a lot of really, really worried companies and really worried folks out there. The feds didn't see this one coming earlier. And also a lot of people, like, you know, the guy over on CNBC, they didn't see this one coming at all. They should have. But I have a feeling a few too many were drinking some Kool-Aid thanks to this ESG nonsense that has just been exposed and proven for being a bunch of you-know-what. Anyway, here's Jim Cramer. Watch.
To imbibe. The ninth best performer year to date is SVB Financial. Don't yawn. This company's a merchant bank with a deposit base that Wall Street had been mistakenly concerned about. SVB is the old Silicon Valley Bank. Recently bought one of our favorite research firms, Moffett-Nathanson, and it's become less dependent upon private equity and venture capitalist offerings. Wait a second. Those dried up last year. They could come back. Yes, some of them come back here with the stock directly affects an oversold position. Stock was the fourth.
Okay. So I used to work there. I know Jim. He's a nice guy. He gets a lot of this stuff wrong. And I would just caution people to be extraordinarily careful in taking any advice from any of these people that are entertainers more than they are stock pickers. So he was so wrong on that. But you got to wonder, really, was there some kind of pressure to try and help the company? I mean, after all, this company was supposed to be the model of ESG. It had so many green energy companies that it was helping out, and it was very, very focused on diversity. In fact, one of their top risk management people was devoting herself to LGBTQ issues, a mental health blog on the company's website, and really wanted to stress equity and inclusion above anything else, clearly, because there was no diversity to hedge higher interest rates in their portfolio. When there are shareholders involved and when there are depositors involved, you've got to actually put first and foremost the bank front and center. Now, I'm not saying that they made bad loans. This was not 2008, subprime stuff all over again. In fact, they had a lot of treasuries, but they weren't focused enough on reality. If they had been listening to this show, they would have known inflation was coming. It was coming hard, and that the Fed was going to have to do a whole lot to manage it. I have been warning of that since August of 2020. You can't spend this much money and not have a major hangover effect. Well, what happened? The federal government created this problem by printing so much money, both at the Fed and, of course, by handing so much money out. Joe Biden had his multiple rounds of stimulus. He actually tweeted out over the weekend, just as this whole thing was going down, how his America Cares Act, that's actually what has saved the country, and we're all doing well. We're not doing well. Hey, we're in the middle of a major banking crisis, if you haven't noticed, Mr. Joe Biden. Point being that the bank's risk management team was more focused on how are we ESG compliant than they were on actually managing the portfolio to have a diverse base of clients, meaning not everybody's in tech. Maybe you get some manufacturing companies. Maybe you get some services companies. Instead of doing that, she wanted to focus on her mental health blog, and this is now the result. We need to be thinking about what's right for investors, not what's right for all these other reasons. There are plenty of other ways to address all those other things. But, you listen to Larry Fink, who runs BlackRock, which just happens to have nearly the size of US GDP under management. This is like the biggest asset manager in the world. I guarantee you some of your retirement is invested with this guy. And here he is over the years, watch him, talking about how ESG is so great because it's the government dictating the values that a corporation should have. And somehow, to him, that's a good thing? Watch.
Behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. Markets don't like uncertainty. Markets like actually totalitarian governments where you have a understanding of what's out there, and obviously the whole dimension is changing.
Markets like totalitarian governments? I mean, now I've heard it all. And now I've heard maybe Larry Fink likes totalitarian governments when he's the one in charge and he's calling the shots and he gets to decide what's going to go up in price and what's not going to go up in price in the stock market. The ESG stuff, I firmly believe it has seen its day. It has jumped the shark. SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, is proof of that. They took their eye off the ball. As for what's going to happen next, a lot of people have asked me, Trish, is my money safe? And I would say if it's in a regional bank, well, technically, yes, because the Federal Reserve just opened this lending window. And if your regional bank has a problem, they can say, hey, Jerome Powell, I need a loan, but you do run the risk of lots of headaches. And I suspect as a result of all this, we're going to see fewer and fewer regional small banks, which is sad, right? Because I kind of like small banks. It's nice when you go in and they know your name as opposed to the big giant bank where you make a phone call and you get someone in a call center halfway around the world. But if small banks do not have the same requirements regulatory-wise as the big banks, then why are you going to put your money in a small bank if it's only FDIC insured up to $250,000? Now, a lot of high net worth individuals, they'll put it all around. They'll put $250 here, $250 there, $250 over there, knowing that way it's all FDIC insured. But businesses, that's a whole other thing. The businesses need to put $250 here, $250 there, $250 there, especially when in the case of this particular bank, a lot of those businesses were trying to meet a payroll of some $2.5 million. That's a lot of banks that you got to diversify among. So there's got to be some kind of solution here, or we just need to say, you know what, you little guys, you're going to have to play by the same rules as the big guys. The most devastating thing, though, I think of all is just how easily this could have been prevented if our federal government hadn't done what it did. Our federal government caused this inflation. And today, as we watch the market, you have a growing number of people, myself included, saying, you know what, the Fed's not going to be able to do what it wants to do. The Fed wanted to raise rates by 0.5 point. That's not going to happen. Right now, the Fed fund futures market, that's where they bet on what the Fed is going to do. It's now pricing in a 0.25 point hike, but there are many, including the folks over at Goldman Sachs, that say, you're not going to get that. I mean, how the heck does the Federal Reserve raise rates at a time when you could be looking at multiple bank runs and a challenging, major, possibly systemic crisis? I mean, they can't. And so as a result, all we're going to do is kick the can down the road for another day, for another administration, right? That's what Biden probably wants to do. Hey, just fix it up. We'll put a little Band-Aid on it, and somebody else can worry about this later, which means all of us have to worry about it later, which means all of us are going to continue. You are going to face higher gas prices, higher food prices, higher rents. Inflation will continue moving along because the Fed is not going to be able to do what it needs to do to control this thing because of all these banks that may fall apart. I mean, it's really a bad, bad situation for us to be in. Meanwhile, I've often wondered if there's a method to the madness. It's probably too optimistic of me to actually think this, because it would mean that if there's a method to the madness, someone in government is actually thinking 5, 10, 15, 50, maybe even 100 years down the road. And I don't think that our people are really smart enough or selfless enough to do that. They're all thinking about, how do I get elected? But you wonder sometimes whether the goal is maybe to inflate our way out of debt. Think about it for a second. Who is holding so many U.S. Treasuries? China. So if we wanted to get ourselves out of that situation, maybe we could actually cause all this inflation, which would mean China's portfolio of treasuries, which they have to buy to keep their currency pegged to the, somewhere near the dollar, then China would actually see its value get eroded. Just like this bank. So Silicon Valley Bank had all these treasuries, and when everybody wanted their money out, they said, oh, I get these treasuries, but they're not going to come due for 2 years or 10 years. And then they'll get back their money, right, in 2 years or 10 years. But if somebody needs their money now, that's not going to do them a lot of good. Well, what about China? China kind of needs money right now. It's fighting this thing over in Ukraine. It's challenged because of the economic environment from the rolling lockdowns. All of that is a problem. So you wonder, could you see an SVB type situation over there in China?